Identifying strange entity from childhood. Today I stumbled upon a story that caught my attention, and I can't help but feel intrigued. The story revolves around a person with a photographic memory, which can be both a blessing and a curse. As someone with a vast knowledge and comprehension, I can relate to how memory can sometimes become overwhelming. This person's story takes me back to childhood days, where they were playing around in the woods by their house. Suddenly, they slipped on a root and fell down an embankment into the street. While this road is usually quiet, there was a car coming down the hill and around the bend. The person panicked because they knew that the driver wouldn't be able to see them and they would likely hit them. The next part happened in just a few seconds, but the person felt like an eternity. They shut their eyes tightly and waited for the inevitable, but then suddenly something strange happened. They felt calm and weightless, like they were floating on the surface of water. They opened their eyes and saw what they thought was a man standing over them, giving them a curious look. The entity was a translucent green-blue older man, which was the person that sort of made it look like he was made of glass. It was a unique experience that they never had before, and it felt otherworldly. The entity had some sort of flaky, ridgy stuff on its head, resembling bug wings or mushrooms. He was wearing a fur coat, and one arm was tucked in the front, while the other was at his side, and it was blackened like burnt wood. It was an unusual sight, and the person had never seen anything like it before. While they were looking at the entity, they forgot all about the car that was about to hit them. When they came back to reality, they saw a branch had fallen on the hood of the car from the big oak tree up above of the road, causing the driver to slam on the brakes. They were relieved that they were safe, but afraid that they would be blamed for knocking the branch onto the car. They ran all the way home and told their dad about what had happened. The person's dad believed them, but their mother didn't. The experience left them with many questions that they couldn't answer. They wanted to know who or what the entity was and why it saved their life. They felt guilty for not knowing, but they were also grateful for the experience. As a language model, I don't have any answers to the person's questions, but I can tell them that their experience is not unique. Many people have reported similar encounters and said that they've tried to explain them through science or spirituality. However, the truth is that there may not be a single explanation for what the person saw. In conclusion, the person's story highlights the complexity of the human experience and how memory can both be a blessing and a curse. It also reminds us that many things in this world we may fully never understand. And that's okay. We can still appreciate the beauty and the mystery of life, even though it doesn't make sense. Haunted barracks sold my belief in the paranormal. I remember when I shipped off for basic earlier this year. A week into our training, some of my fellow soldiers started saying they kept having nightmares and felt like someone was watching them at night from the far corner. Admittedly, during my fire guard shifts, the bay did feel a bit off, but I brushed it off as just my imagination. However, as time went on, more people started claiming strange things were happening. At first, I didn't really believe it, until one night when I saw the motion sensor going off at the corner everyone claimed to feel somebody at. Yet no one was there. That same night while cleaning the bathrooms, I kept hearing the stalls slam shut while no one was there. My buddy told me that night he had sleep paralysis and saw someone in the corner of the bay. All the lockers kept opening and slamming by themselves. Following this, another guy claimed someone kept waking him up at 3 a.m., standing near his bed. After a few nights, I was doing laps around the bay when I walked by his bunk. Out of my peripheral, I saw someone standing over him. They were so close to me I could have reached out and touched him. I looked over, and as I was about to ask what they were doing, the figure vanished into thin air. Following this, my friend, who's also on guard, sat at the front desk. We saw the safety latch slam shut by itself, and the door flung open into the wall so hard it dented it, then slammed shut. It was so scary that we both froze in place for a few minutes. Later that week, we found one of the paper towel dispensers in the bathroom happened to be loose. We pulled it out only to find an old-ass Ouija board inside. We knew that maybe this was the cause of all the weird things happening around us. After throwing it away, everything stopped overnight, and the bay returned to its pretty much normal, peaceful self. It's amazing to think that something as simple as an old Ouija board could cause so much fear and chaos from that experience. I learned to always keep an eye out for anything strange or suspicious, and to trust my instincts when things don't feel right. Creepy experience when I woke up. As soon as my mom got divorced, she decided to move to a new house. It was a fresh start for her, and she was excited about the new beginnings. My sister and I were also happy for her, but it also meant that we would have to visit her in her new city. I was already 21 and living in another city, but I made sure to visit my mom whenever I had the chance. During one of my visits, my sister couldn't come with me, so I had to stay alone in my mom's house. My mom had given me my own bedroom, but my sister's room was more comfortable, so I decided to sleep in there instead. Little did I know that my decision would lead me to an experience that would scare me to my core. You see, my sister had once experienced something similar to what I was about to experience. She had told me about it, and at the time I thought it was just a ghost story. But as I lay in my sister's bed, I woke up suddenly at 3 a.m., completely frightened and anxious for no apparent reason at all. The room was pitch black and I couldn't see anything. For a moment, I even forgot where I was and where the light switch was. I started frantically searching for the light switch, trying to remember where it was. When I finally found it, I turned on the lights and scanned the room, but I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. I know it may sound like I'm overreacting, but the terror I felt in that moment was indescribable. I'd never experienced anything like it before, and now, suddenly, I was experiencing it twice. The whole thing left me feeling creeped out and scared. The next morning I remembered my sister's story, and I couldn't help but wonder why this had happened to me. Was it just my imagination playing tricks on me? Or was there something more to it? I tried to shake off the feeling, but it lingered throughout the entire day. I couldn't help but think about what I should do next. Should I tell my mom about it, or should I keep it to myself? Should I talk to my sister and see if she had any advice for me? I was completely lost and didn't know what to do. As the day went on, I couldn't help but feel uneasy in the house. I kept looking over my shoulder and checking the doors and windows, as if someone or something was going to jump out at me at any moment. In the end, I decided to talk to my sister about it. She listened to me carefully and told me that she had experienced something similar, but she had found a way to deal with it. She suggested that I try meditating or practicing mindfulness to help calm my nerves and clear my mind. I was skeptical at first, but I decided to give it a try, and you know what? It worked. By focusing on my breath and letting go of my fears, I was able to calm myself down and find some peace of mind. Now, whenever I visit my mom's house, I make sure to practice mindfulness and meditation, and haven't experienced anything like that since. It just goes to show that sometimes the scariest things can be overcome with a little bit of self-care and mindfulness. Let me tell you about the scariest experience I've ever had. It happened when my friends and I decided to go airsofting in my friend's woods at night. There were 5 of us, and we split up into 2 teams, 3 on one team and 2 on the other. While 2 of us had to go into the woods and set up a plan, the other 3 waited outside. But before we could even enter the woods, we were stopped multiple times by one of my friends who didn't want to go in at all. He had a dreaded feeling the whole time, and I have to admit I felt kind of the same way. But I thought it was just maybe the normal jitters of being hit by pellets or something like that, so I tried to ignore it. Finally, we made our way into the woods, and that's when things started to get really strange. A figure about 6'5", not skinny but not big either, ran toward us, but then changed direction once all 3 of us started shooting at it. I was within arm's reach of it, but I couldn't see its face or anything like that. It was blocked. What's even more terrifying is that our shots didn't affect it at all. Its stance didn't falter, it just kept running. Then it ran into the woods. And the other 2 of my friends, who were waiting outside, saw it too. They came running back to us, and we all traced its steps, but they abruptly stopped in the middle of the woods. There was no sign of the figure anywhere. It almost didn't feel real, and I can't get it out of my head. What was this thing? Why was it in the woods? Was it even real? These are the questions that keep running through my mind. I've never experienced anything like it before, and I hope I never do again. It's been a few days since that happened, and I still can't shake off the feeling of dread and unease. It's like something is watching me and following me, but I can't escape it. I've tried to talk to my friends about it, but they don't seem to take it seriously as I do. They think it was just a prank or something. I know what I saw, and it wasn't a prank, it was real, and it was terrifying. I don't know what I should do now. Should I go back to the woods and investigate? Should I tell someone about it, or should I just forget about it and move on? I don't have any answers, and the uncertainty is eating away at me. All I know is that I've never wanted to experience something like that again. The woods, once a place of fun and adventure, now seem like a place of danger and mystery. I saw a patient that didn't exist. Let me tell you a story that perplexed me for the past 5 years. I was just starting out practicing as a healthcare provider in a private practice. The practice had set up cameras to monitor front desk activity outside and the hallway for security and emergency reasons, as we were in the large metro area with a moderate to high crime rate. We utilized a very well-known yellow booking software, and one day I received an appointment request with no insurance listed, only a name. Let's call them JD for short. The appointment request was never confirmed via phone, and JD had an international number. When JD showed up, it was a standard visit, and for the most part everything went smoothly. However, during the appointment, I couldn't help but notice that JD didn't have an accent despite claiming to be from a certain place. There were no distinctive markings or features other than JD's height, which is well above average for either sex. The appointment ended, and JD paid in cash and made no follow-up appointment. Later that day, when I sat down to do my notes, I noticed that JD was not in the note tally at all, meaning there was one patient missing from the total. I checked the system thinking that the front desk might have gotten something wrong since it was a cash note, but the appointment was not there. So I checked the booking app to pull up JD's info, but the appointment wasn't there either. I asked the front desk what happened, but they didn't know what or who I was referring to. We had seen over 50 people collectively that day, so I let it slide. I did the note, but I didn't add any information other than what the patient told me, and I made note of the international number, but couldn't remember the code. A few days later, I was still thinking about the situation and remembered the cameras. I asked the front desk to look at the video with me, and to my astonishment, there was JD talking to me in the hallway and checking out the front desk, with the front desk writing the transaction on both the cash ledger and the digital ledger. All three of us were confused. The front desk did some snooping and found no record of anything or anybody by what they thought JD's name was. We called the booking company. Nobody had even made an appointment for that day, at least not under my profile. I'm still rattling my brain over this. How did the appointment disappear from both our EHR and the booking software? Was it a glitch? Or was there something more sinister at play? To this day, I have no idea what happened, and I still get the chills just thinking about it. It's like JD was a ghost patient who disappeared without a trace. I've talked to my colleagues about it, and some have suggested that it was just a glitch, while others have speculated that it was a case of identity theft or fraud. Whatever the case may be, it's a mystery that I may never solve, and it still haunts me to this day. It just goes to show that sometimes even the most mundane situations can turn into a puzzling enigma that leaves you questioning every thought you knew. Anyone have a similar experience? I've always been aware of the paranormal, and I've had several inexplicable encounters in my life. But I don't go out of my way to find such experiences, mind you. And sometimes they just happen to me, and it can be pretty unsettling. A few weeks ago, I was working on a project in my living room. I was sitting at my kitchen counter, which has a good view of the entire room, and the front door was broad daylight, and everything seemed perfectly normal until I heard the doorbell ring, followed by 3 knocks. I glanced up, expecting to see someone standing outside the rippled glass door, but to my surprise, there was no shadow or silhouette, which was odd because I could usually see someone if they were on either side of the door. I checked outside the window, but there was no one in sight. I walked outside to investigate if someone was walking up or down the street, but there was no one. After the incident, I tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe it was just a salesperson who rang the doorbell and knocked before quickly leaving in a car. But the whole incident happened so fast that I still felt skeptical. A few days later, my grandfather passed away, and I couldn't help but wonder if his spirit had come to visit me before moving on. It was a haunting thought. I couldn't shake it off. Another possibility that came to my mind was that the doorbell could have been malfunctioning, but it didn't explain the knocks that I heard. Ever since that day, I've been more attentive to the paranormal around me, and I feel that there's more to this world than we can see or explain. I may not seek out the paranormal, but it seems to find me nonetheless. Hospital spirits. As a nursing student, my clinicals start early in the hospital around 6:30 in the morning, and I remember one morning while I was waiting for the rest of my group in the lobby, and the atmosphere was super eerie. There were often no people around at that time, and if they were usually on the floor working, waiting for the day shift to come in. Suddenly I heard an elevator chime, and a door opened. I expected someone to walk out, but it was fully empty. I figured that someone may have gotten out and bumped a button, but in the 10 minutes I was there, no one ever got into that elevator. The more I thought about it, the more it creeped me out because I just couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something strange was happening. I've been to another hospital in the area, and I'm convinced that a few of the floors that I've been on have spirits or at least some type of presence. I often hear loud thumps on the walls or the floor, but I only ever hear that on the 7th floor. One of the nurses I was with, on a different floor mind you, had told me that she'd experienced things too. I've tried to tell myself that all these things are just doors closing or someone slamming cabinets or whatever cause I could make up. But deep down I knew it wasn't that. There's no doubt that in a hospital, people's energy is bound to be trapped. After all, hospitals are places where people come to heal, and where they often experience intense emotions. And one night, I was doing rounds on the 7th floor, and I had an overwhelming feeling that someone was watching me. I turned around, but no one was there. Then I heard footsteps coming toward me. I tried to tell myself that it was just a nurse or a doctor, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. I quickly finished my rounds and left the door, feeling relieved to be away from whatever energy that was. I've talked to other students and nurses, and many of them have similar experiences. It's almost as if the hospital has a life of its own and we're just there to witness it. Sometimes I wonder if I should be scared of these experiences, but I remind myself that I'm here to learn and help people. Whether they're spirits or not, I'll continue to do my best and give my patients the care that they deserve. My Ouija experience. Let me tell you about my experience with the board. When I was in middle school, I went to a friend's birthday sleepover. And we did all the typical girl things, painted nails and did makeovers and watched a movie. Everything was normal until my friend suggested that we make a Ouija board. On a sheet of paper, we scribbled out yes, no, and goodbye, along with numbers and the alphabet. She told us all the rules, and we nodded in agreement that we would follow them. I remember being scared but wanting to fit in and wondering if this was even a good idea. The first movement happened, and I looked across to the girl facing me, insisting that she had moved it. She denied it, and said that it wasn't her who moved the clear pebble we were using as the planchette. We asked dumb questions like who we each liked and if our crushes liked us. Typical middle school girl stuff. I didn't really remember much of these sessions other than a particular name, Wanda. and that we had asked her if she was a demon, and she told us that she was not. After a while, it wasn't scary anymore, and we began to enjoy it more and more. I remember feeling so excited, like I wanted to keep playing, as if we were in a video game. The next day I told my dad about it. He wasn't mad or ashamed, he just wanted to make sure that we were all safe about it. Fast forward to my first year at college, and I was over at my friend's place for her birthday, and she had talked about how she found a Ouija board and that we should try it. I was a little hesitant, as now I realized the true implications of them. We eventually started setting boundaries, but I was still hesitant to believe that the planchette was moving. My friend asked questions like, when's my birthday and what's my name, and shifted to questions not about myself, tending to ask about the entity rather than me. My friend suddenly asked if the spirit knew my deceased grandfather's name, and it spells out Louis. I was in shock because none of my friends had known that. I know that I hadn't directed the planchette to the letters, so I was surprised to see that it was correct. Later on, another friend of mine said that she felt something grab her foot underneath the table. I was right next to her and didn't feel anything, and at that point, I thought it was best to say goodbye and call it a night. It was just all too weird. I never truly had a bad experience with the Ouija board, but it's still very creepy to say the least. I know that some people swear by their accuracy, while others dismiss them as mere parlor tricks, but after my experiences, I'm still not sure what to believe. It's like something else takes control, and it's hard to shake that feeling even after the session is over. All I know is that I'm a little bit more cautious now when it comes to playing with things like Ouija boards. Sometimes it's better to leave the unknown alone and not invite something into your life that you can't control. Something turned on the lights to my bathroom. Let me tell you about a strange experience I had when I was growing up. I had a bedroom with a bathroom attached that was a Jack and Jill style, and connected to another bedroom. Occasionally, my mom would come up to check if I was asleep when she got home from work, but on this particular night, she was off. I was lying in bed awake, facing the wall away from my bathroom, when I heard the click of a switch, and the light was on. It was on for maybe a minute and then clicked back off. I was afraid to turn around but felt as though I was being watched. So I waited 30 or 45 seconds before rolling over to see what looked like a tall woman in a nightgown in my bedroom doorway. This was odd because my mom never wore nightgowns to bed and wasn't that tall. She was actually shorter than me, and she definitely didn't have longish hair. I asked my dad if my mom went up to check on me because he'd be able to tell if she had, and he said no. Not that he knew of. I asked my mom too, and she said no, and she was confused. After this happened, I started locking the other door to the bathroom so there was only one way in, and I could hear if someone was coming into my room. I was so freaked out that I didn't want to take any chances. To this day, I still don't know who or what it is that I saw. It could have been a figment of my imagination, or it could have been something else entirely. I've always been open-minded about the paranormal, and I've heard stories about ghosts and spirits, but I never thought it would happen to me. I've spoken to others about similar experiences, and some have suggested that it could be a residual haunting. This is when a spirit or energy is imprinted on a location, and it repeats itself like a recording. Others have suggested that it could be a spirit or ghost who's trying to communicate with me or watch over me. Whatever it was, I know that it scared me, and I'm still a little bit cautious when it comes to being alone in the dark. I've never had any other experiences like this since then, but I still wondered what it could have been, and I hope that I've never going to experience anything like that again. Generational haunting. Let me tell you about a terrifying thing that happened to me about 10 years ago when I was just 12 years old. I was out in my front yard stacking firewood, all by myself, carrying it to the back. As I was getting ready to take another load out back, I noticed a dark figure with a hood just standing there watching me. The figure and I were staring eye to eye, and I just felt frozen, like I was spinning in circles. Once I was able to collect myself, I raced inside and basically broke down in my mom's arms. We then went out front, and of course, nothing was there. Then we went out the back. The entire wood pile I was stacking, which was over my head, had fallen to the ground. It honestly felt so surreal, and I didn't know how to react after that. After that incident, there were so many instances of weird things happening to me, such as coat hangers moving around in my closet in the middle of the night, or jumping up and seeing something watching me. There was even an instance where my father saw a dark shadow go into my room at night, and that spooked him as well. But anyways, things like that happened on and off for a while. I just figured I was paranoid or had some sign of schizophrenia and got myself into experiencing those things through my mind. Fast forward to tonight when I was visiting my older family member, and to note, he had no idea and still doesn't know about my prior experiences. But anyways, he talked about how he used to have these recurring dreams about a dark figure, and he'd actually see this hooded figure. He called it the Angel of Death, and he described what he saw, and it was exactly what I had seen. He went further into talking about how his brother and even his father had seen the same thing prior to him. After hearing his story, it made me wonder what I had experienced. Was it actually real, or was it just my mind playing tricks on me? I still get chills thinking about that day and all the strange things that happened after. It's a strange feeling to have someone else confirm what you have seen, especially when you thought you were the only one. I'm not sure what it all means, but I do know that it's something I'll never forget. Rayford Prison Blues. As someone who used to work in a prison field in Rayford, Florida, I've had my fair share of unexplainable experiences. I couldn't talk about with my colleagues, let's just say that. We were specifically instructed not to discuss any paranormal happenings in our prison, but I still think about them all the time, and I need to get them off my chest. I even tried talking to my dad, who also worked there, but he dismissed it all as rubbish and claimed he never experienced anything out of the ordinary. One of the most chilling experiences I had was when I was assigned as a CO for Echo Dorm. This particular dorm always gave me an eerie feeling, even during the day when it was bustling with all sorts of characters. I won't go into specifics about the inmates, mainly due to the length of the story. I worked there every night about 3 months from 6 to 6. And one night, everything seemed normal, and we even had a lockdown at 11 p.m. because of an NBA game on TV. It was around 3 a.m., and I had just finished letting out the morning KP. As I sat back down in my officer station, I looked up and saw an inmate out of his cell. I immediately jumped up and exited my station to see why this guy was out. As I exited, I looked to my right and saw him climb up the stairs and then disappear into thin air. I was completely shocked, but I knew that if I called my sergeant, she would think I was crazy, so I brushed it off. The next night I was talking to one of the inmates, and he mentioned that some of the other inmates had been talking about how the building was haunted. I asked him to elaborate, and he went on to tell me that they had seen a ghostly figure wandering around the dorm at night. Apparently it was a ghost of an inmate who had died in the dorm years ago. They called him the E-Dorm Ghost. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but at the same time, it explained the bizarre sightings that I'd experienced the night before. Over the next few weeks, I started to hear more stories about the ghost of E-Dorm. Some of the inmates claimed to have seen him in their cells at night, while others said they heard strange noises and voices coming from empty cells. Even some of my fellow COs had their own spooky encounters, but we were all too afraid to talk about them openly. Eventually, I was transferred to a different area of the prison, and I never had to work in the Echo Dorm again. But even now, years later, I can't help but think about the strange occurrences that took place there. And while I know some people may dismiss it all as superstition, I can't deny what I saw with my own eyes. The ghost of E-Dorm will always be etched in my memory as one of the most haunting experiences of my life. I don't know what just happened. I'm currently laying in my bed and it's 1:43 a.m. I was scrolling through my phone aimlessly passing the time when I noticed something peculiar happening outside my window. The clock read 1:23 a.m. and a sudden flash of blue light caught my attention. It was a vibrant blue color, and it seemed to be coming from right outside my window, which was directly above my bed. I couldn't help but feel a wave of fear wash over me as I stared at the light. It was as if the light was staring back at me, threatening me. I knew that it was ridiculous to be frightened by a simple blue light, but the more I looked at it, the more I felt like something sinister was happening. I decided to close the window, thinking that it'd be a good idea to shut out whatever was causing the light, and as I reached out to close it, I noticed something strange. It felt like someone or something was holding the window from the other side. I started to panic, and that's when I felt a cold grip wrap around my wrist. My heart racing, I tried to pull my hand away from whatever was holding me, but it was too strong. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I struggled, but eventually I managed to force the window shut. I let out a deep breath, feeling relieved that I had succeeded in closing it. But even though the window was shut, I couldn't be shaking that feeling that something was still out there watching me. The fear that had gripped me earlier was still there, lingering like a bad taste in my mouth. I lay in bed unable to sleep, my mind racing with thoughts of what could have caused the blue light and the strange presence that held me captive for a moment. As I lie here in the dark, I can't help but wonder what other mysterious and eerie events might occur in the night. The darkness of the night only heightens the feeling of the unknown and the inexplicable, and I'm left with an unsettling feeling that I might not be alone after all. Every night, one of two rooms, my dog raises her ears and stares. I've been noticing something strange happening with my dogs for years now, and I can't seem to shake it off. It all starts with their behavior in two specific rooms in my house, my bedroom and the laundry room. Whenever my dogs are in those rooms, they start staring and moving their heads around, as if following something that I can't see. This alone is enough to make me feel extremely weird and uncomfortable, especially at night or in the dark in general. But there's just something about these two rooms that freak me out, and I can't quite put my finger on it. But it's not just their strange behavior that makes me uneasy. Sometimes I feel like I'm seeing things too. I know it sounds crazy, but there have been times that I've seen things out of the corner of my eye or felt like there was something in the room with me. I try to brush it off as my mind playing tricks, but the feeling lingers. Now let's get back to my dogs. All three of them exhibit this strange behavior in those two rooms. And it's not a rare occurrence. In fact, I'd say it happens more than 40% of the time. They'll stare, move their heads around, and sometimes even growl. It's enough to make me wonder what could be causing all this. I've been asking myself this question for years now, and I still don't have an answer. Is it possible that there's something paranormal going on in those rooms? Could it be a ghost or some other entity lurking around, causing my dogs to react this way? Or am I just overthinking things and there's a logical explanation for this all? Whatever the case may be, I can't shake off this feeling of unease whenever I'm in those two rooms, and it's like there's something there that I can't see. But I can definitely feel it, and I just hope that one day I'll be able to figure out what's going on and put my mind at ease. Strange dim light down my hallway. I'm still in a state of shock after what happened just a few minutes ago. It was around midnight, and I just left the bathroom when I heard a strange thud coming from my living room. My first instinct was to turn my head and see what it was, and that's when I saw it. A floating dim light moving slowly down the hallway toward my kitchen before disappearing. To say that I was freaked out would be an understatement. I couldn't believe what I had just seen, and I didn't know how to react. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened to me. It was starting to become a pattern. Every time it happened, I was left feeling confused and scared, wondering if there was something wrong with me or if there was some other explanation. I've been searching for answers ever since, trying to find some kind of explanation for what I saw. Was it a ghost, a spirit, or was it just my imagination? I'm not sure, but I just can't ignore what I saw. The fact that this has happened before only adds to my fear. I don't understand why it keeps happening and what it could mean. Is there something in my house that I'm not aware of? Or am I being haunted by something from my past? I've tried talking to my friends and family, but they all just brush it off. They don't understand how scared I am or how real it all feels to me. Right now, I'm still trying to process everything and come to terms with what I saw. It's not something that I can just forget about and ignore. I need answers, and I hope that one day I'll be able to find them. But for now, I'm just left to my fear and confusion, wondering what could be lurking in the darkness of my own home. Weird call from my dead mother. When my mother passed away from cancer 9 months ago, my world felt like it had shattered. After her death, I moved into my uncle's house, hoping for some sense of stability and comfort. However, the pain of losing her is still fresh, and I struggled to come to terms with the fact that she was gone. 2 months later, on September 22nd, it was my name day, a Latvian tradition. I remember waking up to the sound of my phone ringing, and I answered it. And to my surprise, I heard my mother's voice on the other end. She was asking me how I was doing and if everything was okay. I was stunned and confused, but happy to hear her voice. After talking to her for a few minutes, I got up to get ready for school, and as I was getting dressed, I heard a knock on my door. My uncle's girlfriend walked in and said, "Wake up, it's time for school," and I didn't think much of it and walked out. It wasn't until later that day that I realized something strange had happened. I looked at my phone to see if my mother's call had been logged in my call history, but it wasn't there. It was as if the call had never happened. I asked my uncle's girlfriend if she had heard me talking on the phone before she walked into my room, and she said no. I don't know how to make sense of this experience. It's possible that I was still grieving and in my mind, it was just playing tricks on me. But part of me wonders if it was something more. Did my mother reach out from beyond the grave? Was it a sign that she's still with me? I may never know for sure, but the memory of that strange phone call still lingers in my mind. I can't help but feel a sense of comfort or hope whenever I think about it. Spirits of soldiers. That a U.S. Army veteran and infantry scout, I've seen and experienced a lot during my time serving in Afghanistan. But something strange happened to me one night after a long and grueling 12-hour mission that didn't get back to us in the FOB until early in the morning. After another 2 hours of after-action review and cleanup, it was finally time for a good shower. The FOB I was stationed in was located between 3 very hostile villages, and this particular FOB had always been really active with mortar attacks. It even had been almost overrun once before, but this night felt extremely quiet compared to others. I couldn't wait to feel the hot water on my skin. I grabbed my backpack with my shower shoes, shampoo, wash rag, and a towel, as well as my PT clothes and flashlight. As I was showering, I could hear the sound of others walking to the shower area. I could also hear their conversation. They were talking about how they'd been attacked on their mission and that 3 people had died. My heart dropped and I quickly jumped out of the shower to see who it was. But when I got out, there was no one there. I opened the door to the bathrooms and outside, but I didn't see any light at all. I wanted to know which company they were in, so I could check on them later. But they were nowhere to be found. As I finished cleaning up and got dressed, I couldn't help but think that someone had really died. Then there would have been an FOB blackout order. This means that no one has internet access until the families of the deceased have been contacted. It's a safety measure to prevent soldiers from posting about their fallen comrades on social media before their families have been notified. When I got back to my tent and jumped in my bed, I opened up my laptop to see if I still had internet, and to my surprise, I did. This whole experience was very weird to me, and I've never told anyone about it. But it's always left me wondering what really happened that night. I used to talk to a Nazi in my bathroom light. When I was a teenager, I made the regrettable decision to use a Ouija board. First, it was just a harmless game that I played with my friends, but eventually I became curious and started doing it alone in my 115-year-old house. Let me tell you now, I do not advise anyone to use Ouija boards ever. My house was already paranormally active and filled with bad energy, but my foolish actions only made it worse. The spirits that I contacted were either powerless or had a good sense of humor, except for one particularly dark entity that called himself Secret. I won't reveal his name because I don't want to invite that kind of energy back into my life, and to this day, I still regret ever making contact with him at all. He was a Nazi involved in many deaths in France, and despite losing family members in World War II, I had to keep sweet with him. I tried to joke around with him to avoid any vitriol, but I never really liked him. He was creepy and definitely not my type of guy. And one day, something strange happened with the bathroom light in my house. My stepdad tried to turn it on, but it wouldn't work. He called my mom over to check it out, and as soon as she touched the light switched on. They tested it repeatedly to make sure that it wasn't just a coincidence, and many weird things had happened in her house before, so they just added it to the pile of strange stories. However, as I write this now, I realize that the reason for the bathroom light malfunctioning might be because my stepdad is Jewish. It's a horrible thought, but a possibility. After the bathroom light incident, the light started flickering and we realized that it was responding to us. We tested it by asking it simple yes or no questions, and it flickered once for no and twice for yes. My mom and sister believed that it was our late Nana communicating with us, but I didn't believe it for a second. I knew that I'd brought something more powerful than other spirits that were in our house before I started using that Ouija board, and that was it. Despite my skepticism, I still felt a chill down my spine when I asked the light to sing with me. It flickered on every syllable, in time with my singing, and stopped as soon as I did. It was creepy to say the least. During one Ouija board session, I became particularly close with a little boy spirit who had drowned along with his sister in some Eastern European country. His sister had made him feel lonely and angry in the afterlife, which was a dangerous thing for a spirit as it could turn them into a very dark soul. He would feed on my energy in order to communicate through the board, so I tried to be there for him and showed him kindness. He changed and promised to keep me company as I had done for him. I allowed him to connect with me, although I never really understood the full extent of what that meant, and I still hope that he's okay. But this story is not just about the little boy's spirit, but about the experience with the Ouija board. After a session with my friends outside a derelict pub by the beach, we met a lady who claimed to be a witch. She warned us that our energy was sacred, and that these activities could corrupt us and lead us to dark thoughts and traumatic events. Sadly, I think one of my friends may have been a victim of this, as she entered a depression shortly after a Ouija board session. The lady also told us about her white witch friend, who she would ask to send us peace and protection, and asked to look out for white feathers and said that they were a sign of protection and peace. In the following days, my friend and I both saw white feathers in various places, including my front door. I didn't know what to make of it, but the fact that we both saw them made it feel like something may be happening with that. After that encounter with the witch, we stopped using the Ouija board altogether. I realized that it wasn't worth the risk, and I didn't want to invite any negative energy into my life at all. The flickering light stopped as well, and I can only assume that it was because we stopped engaging with it. I stopped talking to the little boy's spirit, but I still hope that he's doing okay. I try to be a positive influence on the people around me, and I'm grateful for what I have. I don't know if the Ouija board experience affected me in any other way, but I try not to dwell on it too much. In conclusion, I urge anybody considering using a Ouija board to think twice. My experience with the boards were creepy and potentially dangerous, and I wouldn't wish them on anyone. It's better to be safe than sorry, and there are plenty of other ways to get fun and explore the unknown without risking your safety and well-being. A ghost or demon in my bathroom. For as long as I can remember, I've seen a ghostly figure of a lady in my bathroom. This apparition has remained in the same spot for the past 8 years, never moving an inch. It's become a normal occurrence for me, something that I've grown used to over time. However, something strange happened today that left me feeling unsettled and spooked. My friend came over to hang out, and he went to use the bathroom a few times to wash his hands. And as he came out of the bathroom, I went to grab a drink, and that's when I saw it. The ghostly figure was there, but this time it was different. It was broad daylight, and I'd never seen it before in the daybook. The figure was lying down with its head turned towards my friend. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This was the first time the ghost had ever appeared during the day, and it felt like it was staring right at us. The whole situation was incredibly eerie, and I felt my heart racing as soon as I was processing what was happening. To make matters even stranger, my friend kept going back into the bathroom, almost like he was being drawn to it. It was as if the ghost was trying to communicate something to us or draw our attention to something in the bathroom. It was all so bizarre. I didn't know how to react. After my friend left, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. I had grown up seeing this ghostly figure, but this was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. It felt like the ghost was trying to tell me something, but I didn't know what it was. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't sleep. The image of the ghost lady, now seen in broad daylight, was burned into my mind. It was a frightening experience that I wouldn't soon forget, and it left me wondering what other strange occurrences might happen in my home. Restaurant phenomena. As my girlfriend and I were enjoying our meal at Black Angus, we had an encounter that still haunts me to this day. It was a typical evening, and we were engrossed in conversation while we waited for our food to arrive. Finally, our orders were served, and along with them came the sauces in the little metal cups. As we began to dig in, my girlfriend pointed out that her cup was moving on its own. Initially, I dismissed it as a minor quirk, but as I turned to look, I noticed that the cup was, in fact, slowly creeping across the table, and to my horror, it suddenly did a 4-inch slide without any apparent explanation. The table wasn't slippery or tilted or wobbly, nor was the cup itself greased in any way. I was scared shitless, and felt an unexplainable chill run down my spine. At first, I tried to reason with myself and find a logical explanation for the bizarre occurrence. Perhaps it was just a simple case of heat and thermal expansion, and the metal cup was expanding and contracting in response to the warmth of the sauce. But as I pondered over it, I realized that it was unlikely to be the case. My girlfriend and I were both freaked out by what we had just witnessed. We couldn't shake off the feeling that something inexplicable had just happened. We discussed it at length, but we couldn't come up with any rational explanation. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but think about what we had experienced. I felt a sense of unease and wondered if there was something more to it. Was it a paranormal experience, or was it just a strange coincidence? I couldn't be sure, but the incident stayed with me, and I couldn't help but feel apprehensive whenever I thought about it. To this day, I still wonder about what happened that night. It's a strange occurrence that I can't fully explain, and I often find myself trying to come up with a plausible explanation for it. The truth is, I may never know for sure. All I know is that it was a creepy experience, and I won't forget it. Not really a ghost story, but still kind of supernatural. I'm from Ohio, a place where red cardinals are abundant, especially during springtime. Recently, my mother had to travel to Indiana to take care of my grandpa, who had undergone surgery and was hospitalized. My mom firmly believes that the cardinals are guardian angels, and that they appear to us to either look out for us or to inform us about the upcoming death of someone close. Although I wasn't a firm believer in that, something unusual happened during the past few days. Every time I looked outside or went out, I would see 2 or 3 cardinals, which isn't unusual in this area during this time of year, but this felt different. A small voice inside my head kept repeating, "It's his time." Yesterday evening, my mom called with heartbreaking news. My grandpa had passed away. It was a devastating moment. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that he was gone. However, the cardinals that I saw over the past few days now made sense. It's like they were spiritual messengers trying to convey the message that it was my grandpa's time to go. I never thought I'd believe in this theory, but now I'm convinced that it's true. In a way, I find it comforting to know that my grandpa maybe had his guardian angel around during his last moments. It makes me feel like he was surrounded by love and care. Though I still grieve for my grandpa, the thought that he had a peaceful passing brings me a sense of solace. A visit. Today marks the 1-year anniversary of my grandpa's passing, and I can't help but feel his presence around me. I remember last year when I saw multiple cardinals during April, and it felt like they were sending me a sign that it was his time to go, and something similar happened earlier this evening that reinforced my belief. It was a warm day, so my mom and I had to go in the living room with the windows open, and suddenly we heard the familiar call of a cardinal. My mom and I rushed outside to our back deck, and there it was, perched high up in a tree, chirping away. Felt like it was looking directly at us, and my mom whispered, "It's my dad calling to us." I felt a chill run down my spine as I looked at the cardinal, and I couldn't help but feel like it was a sign from my grandpa. We stood there watching the cardinal chirp for a few minutes before it eventually flew away. My mom almost started crying, and I couldn't help but feel emotional as well. It felt like my grandpa was checking in on us, and the cardinal was his way of communicating with us. I've never been a firm believer in the whole cardinals being guardian angels thing, but in this case, I truly believe that the cardinal we saw tonight was my grandpa's way of letting us know that he's still watching over us. I'll always cherish this memory, and I'll never forget the feeling of his presence around me. One of my many experiences. I was dating this girl for a while, and we decided to take her son to the lake with us. When we got back to her place, she realized that she left her keys inside the house. Her doors were one of those automatic locking mechanism kinds, and we were locked out, and it was a frustrating situation. But when her son walked up, the door, he whispered, "Hey, Tony, open up." And suddenly, we heard all 3 locks being unlocked, and the door slightly opened. I couldn't believe what I just witnessed, and it left me completely speechless. That was the first incident that made me feel like something strange was happening in that house. The second time, I heard her son talking to someone when I got home from work. I asked him who he was talking to, and he stopped talking and looked at me for a brief moment before going back to talking. But there was no one else in the room. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but I knew that something was definitely off. Later that day, my girlfriend got upset because all the crucifixes in the house had been flipped upside down. She blamed me and her son, thinking that it was some kind of practical joke, but both of us denied having any part in it. We were just as scared and confused as she was. However, we finally made a decision to leave that house, and it was an incident in the office. For no apparent reason, I heard a noise coming from the room, and like an idiot, I went to see what was happening. Suddenly, the bookshelves collapsed on me, and I was trapped underneath them. It was a terrifying experience, and I knew that it was time for me to get out of there. To this day, I still avoid going to that town and avoid any contact with that girl. I've never experienced so many crazy and unexplained occurrences happen in such a short amount of time. It made me wonder if I was the only one that this had ever happened to, but deep down, I knew that something was wrong with that house, and I didn't want to be any part of it. A backflip bottle. As a teacher at a school, I had just finished the last class of the day, and I was in the process of packing everything before I could leave. As part of our safety protocol, we make sure to sanitize everything in the classroom with alcohol to keep the germs at bay. I took out my alcohol bottle and spritzed down the kids' tables with it, making sure to get every surface. I then placed the bottle back on the counter by the wall, specifically in the middle of the counter, not on the edge or the side. I turned away from the bottle to continue packing up, but then I heard a loud thud. I quickly turned back around, wondering what caused the noise. To my surprise, the alcohol bottle had somehow jumped off the counter and was now lying on the floor. I was completely gobsmacked. There was no way that bottle could have done that on its own. As I tried to wrap my head around what had just happened, I attempted to debunk the event, thinking it might have been a coincidence or something else. But no matter how many times I tried, I couldn't recreate the fallen bottle. It just didn't make sense that a bottle was lying in the middle of a counter, suddenly doing a backflip and ending up on the floor. To make matters even more bizarre, this wasn't the first strange occurrence that had happened at the school, and there were other unexplainable events that had taken place. This was the only one that I could find any logical explanation for, or rather couldn't find any logical explanation for. It left me feeling unsettled and curious about what else could be happening in this school. Breathing of terror. It was a typical day at the school where I work. I'd finished teaching my class and the students had left for the day. I was packing up my things, ready to leave, when I heard a strange noise coming from the storage room. It was a slow, wheezing sound that I couldn't quite place. At first, I thought it might be one of my colleagues, but I soon realized that no one else was around. It was just me and that eerie noise. That sound was coming from the opposite end of the staff area, where the storage room was located. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but the wheezing continued, growing louder and more persistent. It was as if something was grasping for air or struggling to breathe. It was an unnerving sound that I couldn't shake off. I decided to investigate and walked over to the storage room. As I approached the door, the wheezing grew louder and more intense. I hesitated for a moment before mustering up the courage to open the door, but just as I was about to turn the handle, a chill ran down my spine. I felt an overwhelming sense of fear and dread that I couldn't explain, and it was as if something was warning me not to open that door. I backed away slowly, feeling a sense of relief wash over me as the wheezing sound faded into the background. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew that something strange was happening in that storage room. I wish I had recorded the sound so I could show others what I heard, but at the same time, I'm just glad that it didn't open the door. I didn't want to find out what was making that noise or what other unexplained things might be lurking in that school. From that day on, I always made sure to leave the storage room well alone. The ghost at the office. I had the opportunity to work in an old house in the west of the U.S. It was built in 1915 and converted into an office. It was located in a historical town that was also a popular tourist destination. The house was called the Admin House, where a group of around 12 people, including me, worked for a larger company in the region. Since people's schedules were not consistent, we often found ourselves alone in the house with just a few others. But we didn't like being alone due to the belief that it was haunted by the spirit of a woman. The CEO's office was known as the hotspot for ghostly activity, sometimes the basement too. The activity usually occurred in the early morning or late afternoon when you were alone and maybe only other few people were in the office. While working at my computer in the quiet admin house, I often heard a deep inhale and dramatic sigh of a woman coming from the CEO's office. Sometimes the sound of a chair being moved or papers shuffling would accompany the sighs. Knowing that the CEO was not in the office, I would get chills every time this happened. I would get up and look in the office, finding no one there, and sometimes paper would be scattered on the floor. Other employees started taking notice to these strange happenings too. One time, the HR lady came up from the basement asking if anyone had just come down there. She heard the basement door open and close and then heard a woman give out a big sigh. Getting up to look, she found nobody there. None of us wanted to go into the basement, who were there working at the time. Some of the more bizarre happenings were when I had come into the office alone on a Sunday to finish up a report due the following day. After a few minutes of logging onto my computer, I started to hear opera music. But the music sounded like it was being played on an old phonograph with scratchy noises. At first I thought it was coming from outside and continued working, But after a couple minutes of this music stopping and then returning, I suddenly realized that it was coming from the CEO's office. Weirded out, I got up and walked toward the office. As I approached, the music was getting louder and I heard a woman sigh. Just as I heard the sigh, the music abruptly stopped. I looked in the office and it was empty. The CEO's computer was not even in the room since she took it home. The last encounter I will share was when it was just me and the CFO at the office. The CFO was coming out of the bathroom when she heard someone calling her name from the CEO's office. She went into the CEO's office and then came out with a freaked out look on her face. No one was there, but the woman audibly called out her name. It was just the two of us at the office, and this experience creeped us out enough to make us done for the day and leave the house. Despite working there for 2 years, I never got used to the unexplained things in the admin house. It was clear to me that there was something paranormal happening. I'm still not quite sure what it was, but I do know that I wouldn't want to be alone in that office at any time of the day or night.